Okay, welcome to everybody. Good morning and welcome to the Prime Time at the BU Library. Prime Time is designed to celebrate the experiences and the accomplishments of Bethel faculty, students, and staff. It's a collaborative project between the Friends of the BU Library, faculty development, and other offices on campus. We record most of our programming, and you can find those recordings at the BU Digital Library. Coming up on Thursday, December 1st, Dr. Teresa DeGoye will share her study of the effects of herbs on isolated uterine tissue in her presentation, Herbal Supplements and the Uterine Contractions, Still Crazy After All These Years. Today we welcome Jay Rasmussen, Joyce LeMay, Ripley Smith, and Matt Putz as they present a talk about teaching program entitled Building Community in an Online Environment. Okay, this is very strange to introduce yourself and then start a presentation, but this is how it's going to go.
NFL player talking about yourself in the third person.
Right. Yep. Okay, what I'd like to do is set our presentation in a little bit of a larger context, if we could. And when we think about an effective learning environment, it doesn't matter if it's an online environment or if it's a face-to-face environment. There are three presences that are particularly critical to have. And our presentation today is really going to focus on one of those presences, what's called the social presence. In some research, we're going to just refer to it as community in our presentation. But like I said, in any strong learning environment, you're going to have a teaching presence. You're going to have a cognitive presence where the students are attentive, where they're engaged, and then you're going to have a social presence. And like I said, this will be where our primary focus is. Typically, the most powerful learning experiences occur when you've got that intersection. You've got a strong teaching presence, you've got a strong cognitive presence, and a social presence. Okay, so this is all part of a larger equation. Okay, our presentation is going to focus around three initial questions that we're going to address pretty quickly, probably in about 10 minutes or so. And if you'd like the PowerPoint presentation, just send me an email, and I'm more than happy to share it with you. We're going to come at these three questions from a research base, and then we've got three speakers then that are really going to share from their own personal experience, how they've really worked to build community within their online environment. So, in terms of the first question, what are we talking about with community when it's online? I'm going to share three quotes with you now. I'd like you to go ahead and look at the three, and then what do you see in common between the three? I'm just going to let you read. What do you see in common? Now this is the part where you get to talk a little bit. What do you see that's in common here? Okay, say it a little bit louder, Connie. Connection. What else do you see as a common thread between the three? Communication. Okay, relationship. Ken?
Recognition of real people on the other side.
Okay. Anything else? Any other common threads there? So let's move on a little bit. I think this is a pretty fair representation of what we're talking about with community. When we think about the different facets of online presence, we're really talking about 5 different things. Okay, the first one would be the instructors really respecting students. And the word that I would throw in there too would be the word valuing. Okay, not just respecting, but valuing them as people, valuing what their contributions are to the overall learning experience. Sharing of personal information is critical as well too. And learning is a social construct, according to Vygotsky. And the more connectedness there is in the experience, the better it's going to be. So the personal information can come from the students, and I'm going to contend should come from the instructor as well too. Later on, we're going to flesh this out a little bit, and you can see some real tangible ways that can occur in a course. And then an open and hospitable environment, awareness of identity, and then sharing of personal stories and experiences. And again, this can be instructors and should be students as well too. Okay? We often think about social presence online as being difficult to achieve, And I would say that's probably true in comparison with a face-to-face environment. So I think one needs to be particularly intentional about these 5 different areas. Okay, it's not just going to happen on its own, but one needs to really, like I said, be intentional about it as well, too. Okay, so why is it important to build community? Why not just put students in some MOOC, and where they can just pick up whatever content they need? Okay, first of all, this will be my contention, that it's really necessary to fulfill Bethel's mission. And the development of the kind of learners that we're looking for does require that they be in relationship with one another. It's not merely a sharing of information, that Bethel is about. Because learning, like we said before, is a social construct, and it doesn't occur in isolation from other humans. And actually, there's pretty substantial research showing that when there is that social connection that's occurring in the community, it increases the interaction students have with the actual course itself. You can pinpoint some increases in student learning as well. And again, all these resources, just shoot me an email if you'd like to dig into them a little bit further. And actually, there tends to be a higher degree of student satisfaction with the learning experience, when community is built. Okay, when we have a lack of social presence, now this could hold true in a face-to-face environment. You've probably all been in classes where people just are not connected. They're all in the same room, but they aren't connected. Same thing in an online environment. You can see what some of the impacts of that are. Typically, when there's a poor degree of social presence in a course, those are courses often where you've got students dropping out, just very limited engagement, very limited amount of learning. Here's another way of putting it. Like I said, this is one of the largest reasons for high dropout rates among some courses. The instructors have not been intentional about building community within that learning environment. Okay, so what contributes to building that? Okay, so providing some resources that promote that interaction, and we're going to look at a number of different examples of that today. Okay, trying to build a positive spirit, friendship, cohesion, bonding. And often that can be in the light that, hey, we're all in this together, this is difficult, but we're all going to support each other, we're all going to be successful with it. Building that idea of a cohort within a class really builds that support network that's particularly critical. Okay, trust and credibility. Okay, interactions that are task-driven. So we're trying to get everybody working together, like we said. We'll look at examples of that. And then reciprocity and cooperation between students. Okay, so some distractors then. Okay, lack of negotiation. In other words, everybody being told exactly what they need to do, not giving them some freedom to pick and choose. Anxiety, mistrust, and often that comes because of the lack of relationship, that it just wasn't built there, so why should we trust? We've seen this idea of isolation before that can occur in online environments, certainly occur in a face-to-face environment as well, too. And quirks about student personality and so forth. Okay, and we're going to just stop here for some quick comments, some quick questions, and then we'll get into the bulk of kind of sharing some ideas then, too. Okay, so observations on your part, questions, comments, we may all respond, or we'll see. Anybody? Okay. All right, Joyce, let's have you jump in here. I think we're going to need to use our clicker here.
Hello, everyone. Great to see you all. Okay, so I've been doing online teaching for about 15 to 16 years now, which I know makes me sound really ancient, right? But the one thing I've learned about online is it changes constantly. Like a lot of times people will say, you've been doing it so long, you must be an expert. And I'm like, no, not even close, right? Because we're still learning. I think it's the same when we have our face-to-face classes. We're always learning about that. So back in the late 1990s, I was at a MINSCU school, and they said, let's do a human resources online. And I kind of laughed. I go, we can't do human resources online. We are people, right? So that's not going to work. Well, what we ended up doing is I went to Walden University and got my online certificate on how to teach online. It was an incredible experience. And when I look at what I learned back then to what's now, what continues to change is all the technology. So there's so many things. But what has remained the same is community. The sense of community is essential, and they were teaching that way back then. So I'm just going to show you a couple of quick examples. All right, so one thing, when we have discussions, it's important to have discussions, but what do they look like online? I always tell the students, it looks like if you came to class, we were having a discussion, and in the middle of the class, you walked out of the classroom, okay? And then the next day you came back, you missed part of the discussion, right? So how do we get the students engaged in reading? Well, we do large group and small group. So let's say you have 30 students in a class. You can have a large group discussion, but you have to be careful how you put it together so that they will engage in that for 30 people. But small group, you can have 5 students up to 8 or 10 students, and then you can have much more engagement. And you can use a wiki to have a greater engagement, do something different. And then what I do is I tell the students, here's what I'm looking for with your original post and with your replies. This little rubric changes their life and what we're looking for, because they don't know coming in. If you just start and say, when your discussions have 2 posts and you're done, guess what you get? 2 posts and they're done, right? Right. So what I tell them is, for your original post, this is what I'm looking for, and your replies. And the way down here, I say, go in several times and post during the open 24-hour period, if that's what I've done for this particular class. This class that I've been doing with here is our 200-level Principles of Management class. And so they're usually sophomores taking the class, and for many of them, they're just learning how to engage in a discussion that way. So what's really exciting is they get feedback right away. So I'm reading everything. Yes, 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 I said reading everything, all right? That's a huge part of teaching online. So we know what they're saying, how they're saying it, and then we're giving them feedback. And then they get that information, and it's amazing throughout the semester how those discussions just get richer and richer, more and more. No one's counting, they're just engaging in the discussion. And I think that's the key thing when we're looking at discussions. Now another thing is, what we try to do is train the students how to use different tools in order to engage online. For some of them, they say, yes, I know all about technology, but they're not used to dealing with it in what I would call a business professional way, which so many employers are saying, this is how you're going to communicate in the workplace. So we talk about all the different ways they can communicate. Some students say, I need to get together and do a face-to-face because that's what we do at Bethel. That's great. We do that at Bethel all the time, but there's other ways to do it. So we talk about how they can get things done in different ways. Some groups find a way, it works for them. Many of them try different ways. And so my role as the faculty member is to encourage these different ways so they can see how great they can work. Another thing that I do is do a small group project where they have to get together in a team, and then they do an audio presentation. Now, not a video one. Now, we can do a video one as well, but this was something that many employers said students need to know how to do, because so often we communicate in different ways in the workplace. So they're given a company's name, and then they have to research that company and do a professional business PowerPoint for that company. And then what they have to do is then do an audio presentation with that. So I'm going to show you a quick example of that, just so you can see how the students would do that. So I'm just going to make this go larger.
I'm Maddie Simpson. I'm Bailey Wackel.
Turn that up
I'm
a little
Jamie
bit.
Credit. And I'm Blake Bailey. And this is our presentation.
So I'm going to fast forward through it because we're not going to listen to 11 minutes right now. But I'll just be quiet and you can just hear it a little bit.
Sound of music. Schulte grew up in St. Paul, Minnesota, where he dropped out of high school and joined the Air Force. To start The Sound of Music, then an audio equipment store, Schulte mortgaged his
I'm going to fast forward just a little bit to a couple other slides that talk about key people. I want you to look at the slides as I'm going through it. Some financial information.
Best Buy's main competitors are Walmart, Amazon, Apple, and Target. One business strategy that Best Buy uses is the low price guarantee to ensure that they're...
I'll just show you one more. Then they talk about what we're learning in business, all the different products,
Best Buy is among one
industries.
of the largest.
Talk about claims and
Buy's code of
suits.
ethics says the following.
And they talk
Best Buy
about
is
issues from
committed
the
to the
textbook.
protection and efficient use of the world's resources, including the paper we produce.
So I'm going to stop it there. So my point in showing that is that students are put in these groups, and what they do is they make these PowerPoints, they have the audio with it, then they post it. Then all students are required to go in and listen to the team posts, and then they have an open discussion about what they've learned about that company. I've had students say, I never knew anything about that company. I had no detail about that. So they're learning professionalism in the business world because it's principles of management. They're learning about these companies, but they did it in such a different way in order to make this work. So we've gotten a lot of great feedback from students on that. And then, let's see, back here. And then the last thing that I do that for some is a little different is when I'm doing fully online, I started having time where the students would come to my office and meet with me one-on-one. Okay, now that's a little different because they have to obviously be here. Sometimes I've taught summer classes, students aren't here, other times they are here. Well, what I had them do is come once a month for 15 minutes and meet with me. Yes, I know that's a lot of time, it is, but I'm telling you the time involved with that has been phenomenal. And so the students have reported back on that and the way we got to know each other in different ways and talk about classroom things. So that's just another idea in which to engage the community. Okay, I think I'm done, so I'm passing it over to Matt.
Thanks, Joyce. And you could actually probably do that at a distance too, right?
Absolutely.
So
Yes,
phone call.
use our tool.
Exactly. That would still work anyway.
Absolutely.
My name is Matt Putz, and my main job here at Bethel is I direct the teaching and learning technology team, but I also teach in the graduate school, and I've taught the CAP school as well. And the courses that I teach are usually either leadership-oriented or technology-oriented. I'm teaching a conflict management course right now for some of our master's students. I've taught in the doctoral program a few times as well. So a number of different things, but I don't teach in the College of Arts and Sciences. So the kinds of strategies that I use are, like Joyce's, would be more tailored toward 17 to 22-year-old types who are residential most of the time. I'd be more tailored toward adults that I never see ever physically. So just a few things that I do, and this is not all that I do, but there's some examples. One of the things that I do is I try to blend casual and formal communication as much as possible. So one of the knocks on certain kinds of distance courses is that they can feel really over-formalized because we're trying to make them look and sound and feel as professional as possible. And I try to do that if I'm doing a lecture. So I build a lot of slide-based lectures. You can see that I try to use graphics that are pleasing. I actually write out my entire narrative for the slide and I read it, so it's formal, but I think it's pretty sharp. That's what I do for content-based stuff, but then when I'm actually communicating with students, it looks more like that. So this is actually a screen grab from a video that I just put out to my class last week because it was Thanksgiving and because I do an overview of the previous week. It gives me a chance to be able to comment kind of broadly to the class on everything that they've been talking about. It's sort of the way that if you had your classes in small group discussions, and then you had brought them in a face-to-face class, and then brought them back and had each one of them share what they've been talking about, and then as an instructor, you have a chance to provide some commentary and some direction and pull things together. That's what this is for me. And then I'm also previewing the upcoming week and doing this. It's 7 or 8 minutes long. And I do it this way instead of creating some kind of formal presentation because I want my students to understand that I'm a real human being and that I have schedule problems. And this time, like I said, it was Thanksgiving and my family was making a ton of noise in my house, and so I went out in my garage with my sweatshirt on to make this. And so then I get questions about what's that? And what's that? Which is actually what you're going for when you're teaching, because you want your students to see you as a fully dimensioned human being, not just as some kind of talking head. And I encourage my students to do this as much as possible as well when it's appropriate in the class. And this is one of the ways that they get to do this. Ripley is going to talk a bit more about this when he gives some of his examples, but go ahead and read through this. This is the personal introduction forum prompt that I typically use. So 3 things in there that I think are important. One is there are no requirements around this other than they have to do it. The second one is that they can use any kind of medium they want to use. So if they want to record a video of themselves, I have a lot of students that do that. They're allowed to do that. If they want to write a paragraph, they can do that. If they want to point people to their Facebook page, they can do that. It doesn't really matter. This is just their chance to say, this is who I am. And this is, and then finally, I encourage them to share one thing about themselves that their fellow classmates may not already know. In an environment where students may have been taking courses stepwise with each other and have had these same, in some cases, these same students in classes with them previously, this allows them to be able to think a little bit about how have I not shared about my life? What's something I can share that even some of the veterans in this cohort maybe don't know about? And obviously it's great for people who are new as well. And then finally, there's a common misconception in distance education that when you're trying to create community, that you have to do some kind of special activity to do that. Like somehow you have to create some kind of communal experience for all your students. And that those kinds of things can be useful, but what I try to do is in every single assignment that they're doing, or as much as possible, I'm trying to get them to talk about their lives in some way. And usually that involves having them demonstrate, first of all, that they understand the content from the week in some way, that they perceive what's going on and they can see how it fits. But then they have to bring back a part of themselves that relates to that content and share it. And obviously they get to choose how they do that, so they can decide how much of themselves they want to reveal. And in some classes it's going to be different. So in this conflict management class, they're talking about stuff that might be a little bit closer to home than in some other classes. But this gives them an opportunity to build community amongst each other without even really feeling like they're doing it, because it's a part of the actual assignment that they're participating in. Oh, this is me too? I thought I was done. Finally, there are some structures that you can create that will enable you to create community. Joyce talked about this earlier, about having small group discussions. This is one that my students just did. Actually, it was due today. I have some students in here, actually. It was due today. So they just, instead of having a forum discussion this week, I divided them up into groups of 4 and said, you just need to meet together somehow. I called it a Google Hangout because most of them will use that because they're distance students. But then I tell them in the commentary, you can use whatever method you want. So if you all live locally and you want to get together at Caribou or whatever, you can do it that way too. It doesn't matter to me. The point is, I want them actually conversing with each other synchronously. There will always be some students in your class who are maybe a little bit better suited toward being verbal than they are toward writing. Most successful distance students are good at writing. They have to be if they're going to be able to be successful in an environment. But some students still really enjoy, even maybe just once in a class, the opportunity to be able to sit down and have a conversation about what's going on. And so I usually try to have one of these activities per class at least. Now, one of the difficulties with this is that many students take distance courses not so much because they're physically distant from the university that they want to take the course from. They take the course because they can't really fit into somebody else's predetermined time schedule. So it's more about time issues than it is about the actual location. And so if you try to get everybody together, if you had 30 students in your course and you said we're going to have this time that we're going to meet, that can be really challenging for them, because for them distance isn't the problem. It's I can't do 7 o'clock in the evening. That's why I'm not in a face-to-face class. So putting them in small groups though, and saying you have a whole week to figure out when amongst you will work best for this. And in this case, I didn't, because they've had other conversations on this topic before, I didn't need to give them a lot of really specific prompts because the prompts are actually coming out of their writing assignment. So they have a lot of choice about how they're going to have that conversation. It still gives them the feeling, as Jay was saying earlier, that they've negotiated their way through this, that they have some power over how they complete this assignment, and that they don't have to stick to this one day or this one time, and yet they still get that synchronous interaction that some of them may really benefit from.
Okay, thanks, Matt. I teach a fully online course in measurement and assessment, which is quite a challenge to teach, and then I also direct a fully online master's program too. I've had the unique opportunity of having a group of students in my online class, and then about a month later actually having that same group of students in a face-to-face class. What was interesting was at the end of the face-to-face class, I had all 3 of the students come up to me after the face-to-face class and say, you know, I felt much more connected to other people in my class when I was in the online class versus the face-to-face class. And I worked really hard to build community in a face-to-face environment, but I asked the students why, and they said because in the online environment, everybody really has to participate. You know, they need to post, they need to respond, And those students that are a little slower to kind of put their thoughts together, those that just need more time, they have that time in the online environment. So I'm going to contend that it's very possible to really get some deep, rich discussion where people are connected, in an online environment. One of the things I find real helpful is to have a predictable routine within your class. And this is an example of the first week of my class. I'm actually teaching this particular class. So what I do is I have students do a number of, I'm going to call them learning experiences before they post. Okay, so these are the things I had them doing for a given week. I work on what I call a weekly rhythm. So it's a weekly module, and then they need to post to the forum. That posting is always related to the content. I'm always having them connect to one another in some way too in that posting. And then by the end of the week, they need to complete an assignment then. So they know my weeks start on Tuesday, this is due Friday, the final assignment and the postings are due on Monday night then. And with that rhythm, they can actually think about the course, not try to figure out when are things due and how do I turn it in and all that type of thing. I'm trying to reduce the structural stress so they can focus on each other, focus on the course as well too. What I know this rhythm as well, so what it tells me is this is when I need to give my feedback on assignments. So I've got stuff coming in on Friday night, which I'm looking at, but then I have my big assignments coming in Monday. So I literally set aside part of my Tuesday and usually part of my Wednesday just to respond to students. It's a huge amount of work to build an online course, but if you've built it well, then your job really becomes giving feedback. And I'll contend that giving feedback online, I can spend way more time and be way more effective with it. But I want to get student feedback before they enter into the next module. So for me, my Tuesday, my Wednesday, a fair amount of those days go to giving feedback then. That instructor feedback is really critical. This is some research dating back to '87, but absolutely critical. Okay, one of the biggest critiques that we receive at Bethel as instructors, face-to-face or online. But again, keeping up with it, that weekly response is really critical. They need to know you're there, that you care, that you're listening, that you're fully engaged. Okay. Earlier on, we talked about kind of respecting and valuing students in some way. One way that I like to do that is use student work as much as I can in the course. So if I find something that's particularly well explained by a given student, in this case we were looking at different validity considerations, I ask their permission and then I use it as a model. This is another great way of thinking about this. But I'm valuing what they have to say. I'm helping them see value, in what their peers are doing as well too. Okay, this is another example of it early on in the course. This is one of my posts. I was trying to recognize what degree of excellence we had in that group of students that were there. I'll just give you a chance to look at it briefly here. This list went on and on, but everybody was cited at some place in there too. So I'm trying to help them see that they can value their colleagues. There are people in that group that they can go to that have expertise that they don't have, maybe I don't even have as well too. I think it's critical too how you structure your posts, and it's very common to structure a post that is just based on content. That's not what really a post is designed to do. Okay, a post in my estimation should have kind of three critical dimensions. One, it needs to be related to the content, so it needs to point them to the content. It needs to point them to one another in some way, and it should point them to you in some way, because you're going to respond as well. So what I've found is it's very helpful to give them some direction on how they can respond to others. So you can get a comment that's more profound than, oh, great idea. Okay, but they find that very helpful. Okay, and then just sharing some personal information is critical. I have one discussion post where I ask them to think about how within their faith tradition they see assessment practices and principles exhibited. Could be within a Christian tradition or Hindu, Muslim, whatever it might be. And it's they've never thought about it or even really written about it before, so I actually started off. Okay, I put the first post out there just as a bit of a model for them as well too. But again, I'm showing them that, hey, I'm in the conversation, I care about this, I'm thinking about it, I'm struggling with it as well too. So I'll try to model some of these things. Okay. And then sometimes I'll use Jing, which is just a way of bringing my own voice to the course. I do think an effective online course, Instructor Voice, is really critical. In my estimation, it should not be a course in a box where you've got some anonymous instructor, espousing all this great wisdom. But I'll use a Jing then to just bring my voice to a conversation as well too. And this is on everybody's favorite
Welcome
topic.
to this Jing. The purpose of this presentation is to familiarize you with some citations that it's possible to use in your paper, and also to talk about some common errors that students have as they work with the AP.
So Jing is just super simple to use, but I'll use it when I'm talking about papers, APA style. I'll use it on certain student examples of things that are really well done, but it's a way of bringing an instructor voice to a conversation too.
Is handled for it. Our second example would be for any kind of curriculum or course materials that you want to use that come from an online source. And in this case, the student found helpful some PowerPoint slides.
Okay, I think we've got Ripley up here.
I'm Ripley Smith. I'm in the Comm Studies department, and I teach two courses primarily online. One is our Comm Technology course, and I do that as a summer course, and then I also teach media communication online, and again, mostly in the summer. There are a couple of things that I'll sort of echo and maybe expand a little upon that Matt and Jay and Joyce have mentioned. One is, it should be clear by now that when we're talking about online instruction, these spaces are perhaps more socially constructed spaces than our face-to-face classes, which are also socially constructed to some degree, but it's really important that we pay attention to those variables in the online course. And as a socially constructed space, we're talking about two primary variables that create presence online. And Jay mentioned a number of variables, but two that you might pay attention to in your course construction. One is interactivity. As the course becomes more interactive, the students feel more present and feel the presence of others more keenly. So one of the things that I do is I create in the first stage of the course a meet and greet forum, similar to what Matt does, where the students get to introduce themselves. But I also put a podcast up for myself that I call First Things. And the students can dive into that podcast and they get to meet me. They learn a little bit about me personally as well as professionally, and then I lay out what the course. It's like that first class period where you'd sit down and introduce yourselves, meet the students, talk through the syllabus, and I do that in that First Things podcast. I also have a couple of things that I put on the site early on, and one is a note about being an online learner. What does it mean to be in a collaborative online space like this, and how is it different than a face-to-face classroom? I put some of the research citations in there that talk about these kinds of spaces, and the students can see themselves in this. I kind of make it an adventure for them, that we have a special opportunity here to really do something unique, and it kind of tries to set the stage for them to be in a space and be a contributor to that space, as opposed to sort of being marginalized. And I find that there's a dialectic in online teaching that you're kind of waging war against. One is the student takes an online course sometimes because they want to be autonomous, right? They want to do it on their own time, in their own way, and not have to be bothered by your schedule, right? And so I try to facilitate that to some extent. In my course, everything is due at the end of the week, so that, especially in a summer course, the students, they've got work lives, they've got their social lives, they've got things going on, family commitments, and so they can plan everything out during the week, and then it's all due at the end of the week. And then if they have posts that they have to respond to from other students, they know that they get to do that in that week following. And so things are done on a weekly basis in my course. I try to accommodate that autonomy that they're looking for. But then you also have the flip side of that dialectic, and it's the collaboration. And so I do a couple of things where I try to facilitate the collaborative environment. And one of them that students seem to appreciate is a well-organized Moodle site. And Moodle site construction differs, but I try to lay everything out so they know what the materials are that they're working with that course, what the assignments are, and with every single lecture or post that they have to do, I try to put the resources underneath that particular area so that they don't just have a list of resources and a list of posts, but they see how they fit together. And then what I find is students then work through those kind of at the same pace too. And so they know that everybody's probably doing this post here at lecture 1 first, and then the postman post, and they can go in and respond to those. They know that, okay, everybody's doing that one first, and then they'll go in and respond to that because they'll know everybody's posts will be in approximately at the same time. So one of the things that I use is a tool called Camtasia. It's a screen capture tool, but then it also uses the camera on your computer, so you are actually in the shot. So here I am in my office at home, and I'm introducing the course for this MediaComm course. And so I can walk them through the Moodle site, and I can scroll through this. I won't play this video for you right now, but and then I'm there, and they can see that, again, I'm a fully dimensioned human being, and I talk about my guitars that are just behind me in the corner there, and when I'm not busy reading their stuff, I might be playing a little Simon and Garfunkel. So it humanizes you as a professor. And then another thing that I do in trying to get the students to collaborate with each other is some of their work that they're producing is team-based, and then it's also using the tools. So this is a CommTech course, and they're analyzing a cutting-edge technology, but they're doing it as a group. And so they produce a video essay as a deliverable. And so what this looks like for the summer is a little bit different. This example that I'll play you just a clip from is from an on-campus class. But in the summer, when they see this example, because I post this on the site, they then involve friends, family members, because it's not something you can do all by yourself. And so it's really creative how they see that my learning and this journey that I'm on is not just me. It's about finding collaborators and working with them. And so they're doing this together, multiple people online producing this video, but then they're using resources that they have around them. So just a quick clip so you can see the great stuff that these guys do. I've been banned. That's not right.
Look on the YouTube icon down in the lower right.
Yeah.
Ripley.
Okay. Because this is my video.
What do I do, Dave? Are you
Hey there, Jimmy. What you doing?
Nothing. Just looking at this cool sticker.
Oh, that isn't just an ordinary sticker. That's what they call an RFID tag.
Whoa, cool. What's that?
Well, Jimmy, I'll tell you. Are you ready to expand your mind and learn?
Boy, am I.
RFID stands for Radio Frequency Identification, and it...
Okay, so you get the idea. And they produce these. It's fun. There's research involved. There's team collaboration involved. And then they produce it as a video essay. And they had a ringer. He's a professional actor. He's done shows at the Guthrie. So that's why I use this example. But I think we're going to open it up now to comments and questions that you have about online courses and the development.
Yeah, if we could have the team come up here then. Comments you have, questions you have. We don't want to portray ourselves as the only ones that know anything about building community in an online course. So if you'd like to add a comment, that would be great too. So we've got a couple minutes here. So questions, comments, please. While you're thinking of the great things you're going to say right now, Scott, can you just stand up? If you don't know Scott, that's you, Scott. Scott's stand up. If you don't know Scott, amazing media guy. If you want any kind of media questions are good to ask. Molly Noble, can you hear me? Molly, stand up over there. Absolute great one to just ask questions of as well. Bob Kistler, right here, an incredible guy, great resource for you. And then our famous Matt Putz, the head of this whole deal too. just got great ideas. He'll help you accomplish what you want to accomplish online. We got some great people here. Okay, I don't want to lose 2 minutes of instructional time here, okay? It's the teacher in me. So comments, questions, throw in your own 2 cents on this question too. You know, how do you build community online?
What do you suggest for leading a Google Hangout? A couple key points.
Either one of you?
I can answer that. First of all, make sure that if you're requiring students to use a certain tool, whatever it is, that they have the resources available to do that. So provide tutorials, provide contact information if they're not already familiar with it in your program for people like teaching learning technology or others in your program that will help them with this. I think that's the first thing. If you're going to have them use any kind of collaborative tool, make sure they've got lots of resources for those that aren't comfortable with it so they get familiar with it. And the second thing is, I think it's important to make sure that you actually structure their conversation for them to whatever degree is appropriate for the course. And so in some cases, if they already have a structured thing they're working on, you may be able to just tell them, just go talk about this, you have this amount of time. But in some cases, you may need to actually preload with questions. The example that I put up here has a peer review that they do at the end. It's not actually a part of their grade. They don't know that. I mean, they have to turn it in, but I don't look at what they've written about their fellow students to give their fellow students grades, but it's my way of taking the temperature of what's going on in the groups, just make sure things are good. So if they've got a way to be able to have the conversation, and then they've got some good parameters around the conversation, and then they also have some way of reporting out. There could be other ways you would do that too, maybe have someone summarize it or whatever. I think those things are helpful.
Probably the one thing I would suggest in small group work is to think about the size of your groups. And cooperative learning theory would suggest a group of 4 or smaller. That way you're going to have maximum engagement. Typically you've got enough input to really deal with whatever issue is at hand. So I do recommend 4 or smaller in groups if you can do that. Okay, yeah, Dave?
It's perhaps just that I'm slow at my work, but the increased amount of time that it takes me to teach online sure cuts into other parts of my teaching and life. And I know some of that's just upfront costs, but I just find it much more difficult to stay really engaged over time, semester after semester. Any thoughts about the workload and keeping engaged yourself?
I'll take a quick shot at that and then others can go too. I think it's real tempting once you build an online course to not pay attention to it the second time you teach it, to all of a sudden make the course go live and you've done all the work initially. So I think before you even start a course the second time or the third time, I think you need to go through your own course again, and it just mentally gets your head in the game, I think is really critical. Building a course takes huge amounts of time. You know, I wouldn't want to tell you, but I probably had 150 hours in building a course. It's way faster now working with Matt's team and a whole bunch of others. But I do believe that once your course is built, and if it's built well, then you need to update it, but your time can go into giving feedback. I teach both face-to-face and online, and I can honestly say that I don't spend any more time teaching online than I spend teaching face-to-face. But and I still really pay attention to what's going on, try to give really, really good feedback. So I think a lot of that is just in how you structure your assignments and how you build in what your feedback mechanisms are going to be. So I would suggest if you're spending more time in this online than face-to-face, that you may want to take a look at how you're structuring the assignments and what your feedback mechanisms are. So I'd be more than happy to show a little bit of what I do with it. I know Matt and a whole bunch of people, you know, kind of deal with this issue a lot, but I honestly don't think you need to spend more time. But it is where all your time can go almost because the course is built. That's the big advantage.
Real quick, engagement and then feedback time. On engagement, I find that engagement is based in part upon the relationship you've built with the students. So how engaged you are in the course. So I do a Skype appointment early on in my summer courses. So the students and I meet on Skype and we get to know each other a little bit, and I ask them if they have any questions or concerns going into the course. Feedback time, a tip that I got from Matt a while back was, I do a lot of posts in my course. They post on every reading that they do, and so summary comments. I'll read through all of the class posts, and then I'll give a global summary, and then kind of a shout out to different students that had really great things to say in my summary comments, as opposed to commenting on every individual student's post. And so I'll do that with some of the posts. And other posts are graded if there's more, if there's something else in there that I need to grade individually. But the summary comments was a huge time saver for me on feedback.
I do comment on every student post, but I do it very, very briefly. But I want them to know that I'm hearing it. They're knowing that they're heard because of his larger posts where he's including comments they've made and so forth. The key thing is that students know they were heard. I think that's what's really important.
I got one thing I can say about that too. I know we're over time, but one thing that I do to stay engaged, especially if I'm teaching multiple courses at the same time, and for me as an adjunct, I don't always do that, but I've had times when I've been teaching 2 or 3 courses at the same time. And so I'll actually sit down before the course starts, and I will map out, kind of, Jay does this informally, but I do it maybe even more. I've not seen exactly how you write it down, but maybe even more formally than that. I map down exactly when I'm going to deal with every single thing in the course, for if it's a grad course for 6 weeks or for a doc course for 8 weeks. What it allows me to do is to then kind of turn my brain off for a day or 2 days or whatever I need to do, knowing that I'm going to get reminded of it, because it can get a little bit overwhelming and noisy inside my head when there are so many details flowing around. And then what happens is, because my students, if I have face-to-face students, so I've had times when I've been teaching face-to-face and online at the same time, they're sitting right there in front of me, and so I know they're jamming me back into reality all the time. But my online students, if I don't have something reminding me, my online students can start to feel like a distraction to what I'm doing with the people that are right in front of me. And that's not what they are. They're just not physically there. So having some kind of a pre-built schedule helps too.
And I agree with everything that everybody said, because doing the same thing, but I think what we have to do is take the time to set the course up. Now that does take a lot of time, but once you've done that, then you have time for the management, and then we just have to have these clues that we share about how to do that. And so I do the same thing that Ripley does as well, is doing some of the summary ones where the students know that I'm there, I'm reading. They totally trust that I'm reading all of it. There's always a few students that will test if you're reading it, and they love when you find that out, right? Because we're actually reading it. So they know that, and then they know that you're engaged with it all the time.
Okay, I think we're going to need to wrap it up here. Again, if you'd like the PowerPoint, shoot me an email. I think any of us would be more than happy to talk with you. And if you don't know Scott and Molly and Bob and Matt, there's just a bunch of great resources here too. So thanks everyone for coming. Really appreciate it.